Chapter 1. The Queen's Wish a long time ago, in a faraway kingdom. Winter spread her white blanket across the land. Snowflakes fell gently from the sky, covering the mountains, the trees, and even the roofs of the castle where the king and queen lived. The air was cold, but inside the great stone palace, fires burned warmly in tall fireplaces, and candles lit the long halls. One evening, the queen sat by a tall window made of glass. The window had a frame of black wood, polished so carefully that it shone like a mirror. Outside, snowflakes danced slowly through the air. The queen looked out at the falling snow and sighed. She was sewing with a needle, working on a piece of white cloth, and as she pushed the needle through the fabric, she pricked her finger. 3 bright drops of red blood fell on the cloth. Against the whiteness of the fabric, the red looked sharp and beautiful. The queen looked at the blood, then at the snow falling outside. She whispered a wish. If only I could have a child as white as snow, as red as blood, as black as the wood of this window frame. She held her hand against her heart, dreaming of the baby she longed for. The wind outside howled softly, almost as if the world itself had heard her prayer. At that moment, she felt a strange sense of peace, as though her wish might one day come true. And indeed, the queen's wish was granted. Months later, her belly grew round, and the king announced with great joy that the queen was expecting a child. The castle filled with excitement. Servants prepared little clothes, the cooks planned feasts for the day of birth. The people in the villages prayed for the queen's health. Everyone in the kingdom looked forward to the arrival of the royal baby, but joy was mixed with sorrow. The queen's health grew weak as the months passed. She often lay in bed, her face pale but still beautiful, her hands resting on her stomach. The king loved her deeply and stayed by her side, but he could not take away her weakness. At last, on a bright winter's day, the queen gave birth to a baby girl. And just as she had wished, the child's skin was white as snow, her lips were red as blood, and her hair was as black as the window frame. They named her Snow White. The king wept with happiness at the sight of his daughter. The queen, though weak, smiled as she held the baby close. She kissed the child's forehead and whispered, "My Snow White." The queen felt her wish had been fulfilled. But she also knew her time in the world was short. Only a few days after the birth, she closed her eyes and passed away, leaving the king and the baby alone. The castle wore black banners of mourning. Bells rang sadly in the towers. The king was heartbroken, yet he promised to care for Snow White with all the love left in his heart. And so, the baby grew in the shadow of loss, never knowing her mother, but carrying her mother's beauty within her. Chapter 2. The Birth of Snow White. Snow White grew quickly. As a toddler, she laughed often, filling the cold stone halls of the castle with warmth. Her cheeks glowed like roses, and her hair shone dark and silky. The nurses adored her. The king loved nothing more than to lift her into his arms and walk with her through the royal gardens, showing her the fountains and the roses. The people of the kingdom loved their princess as well. Whenever the king rode through the towns with little Snow White seated before him on his horse, the people waved and cheered. They called her our little star, because she brightened their hearts. Yet even as joy surrounded her, the castle still missed the queen. The king often sat alone, staring at the window where his first wife had made her wish. He longed for companionship again, and he worried about raising a daughter without a mother. After some years, the king decided to marry once more, hoping to give Snow White a stepmother who could guide her and bring warmth to the home. He searched far and wide and finally married a woman of rare beauty. Her skin was smooth, her hair shone like silk, and her eyes sparkled like jewels. But behind her beautiful face lived a proud and cruel heart. She loved to be admired, and she could not stand the thought that anyone might be more beautiful than she was. This new queen brought with her a strange treasure, a tall, shining mirror framed in gold. It was not an ordinary mirror. It was a magic mirror, one that could speak. The queen would often stand before it, admiring her reflection, and she would ask, "Mirror, mirror, on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" The mirror, bound by magic to tell only the truth, would always reply, "You, my queen, are the fairest of them all?" The queen would smile proudly at this answer, for nothing pleased her more than being the most beautiful in the land. Snow White, meanwhile, grew more lovely each year. Her innocence and kindness added to her beauty, so that everyone who saw her admired her, not only for her face, but also for her gentle heart. The queen noticed this, and though Snow White was still young, a seed of jealousy began to grow in her dark heart. Chapter 3. The death of the queen and the new stepmother. As the years passed, Snow White blossomed into a graceful young girl. Her skin stayed white as snow, her lips remained red as roses, and her hair flowed black as ebony wood. People whispered that she was becoming more beautiful than anyone they had ever seen. Servants in the castle spoke softly of her beauty, and villagers who glimpsed her during royal rides carried stories of her loveliness back to their homes. At first, the queen ignored these whispers, thinking Snow White was only a child. But as time went on, the words of the people reached her ears more and more. Her pride was easily wounded. She could not bear to imagine that someone else, especially her stepdaughter, might be fairer than she. One evening, the queen stood before her mirror as usual. Her long gown trailed on the floor, her jewels glittered in the candlelight, and her face was calm but expectant. She asked her favorite question in a voice sweet as honey, but sharp as a knife. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" The mirror glowed faintly as though alive. Then it spoke in a steady, honest voice. "You, my queen, are fair, it is true. But Snow White is fairer than you." The queen's face froze. Her eyes widened, and her hands tightened on the edge of the mirror. She asked again, her voice trembling with anger. But the mirror gave the same answer. Snow White was fairer. Snow White was more beautiful. Jealousy burned in the queen's heart like fire. She could not eat, she could not sleep. Each day the thought grew stronger. Snow White must not live to outshine me. And so her dark plan began to form.